We got into it a little bit in the Coors Light review that we did, but not super deep. But we got into like how there was like a controversy. I think the original owner was kidnapped. Hey, how's it going, Peter?
Hey,
Hello, finally made it work.
Yeah, there you go. There you
nice.
go. Yeah, it's nice to meet you, man. Thanks for joining us.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. We've been wanting to chat with you for a long time because like we've done this kind of thing. I think I was mentioning it to you with we tried to do like a lot of the beer YouTubers who've been around for a really long time, just to sort of like talk to them about their experience on YouTube and all the little things, how they got started and all that, and what inspired them. But also just because we've been doing this for about 4 years now, going on
Yeah.
5, and so it's always fascinating to hear people's stories and what their experience with it has been. And I think you've been doing this longer than anyone else who's around right now. Is that true?
I think I was not the first one, but I was one of the early ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2009, so
Wow.
a long time ago.
That's impressive.
And nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, very nice.
Likewise.
It's always fun to like talk to somebody who you've seen on YouTube in these videos here and there for
100%.
a couple of years, and just put a person to the video.
I like the format as well. I've been listening to a couple of your interviews while I'm working.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
I listened to, for example, the one with Matthias Thulm,
Yeah.
who is
Yeah.
a great dude, really
Legend.
legend. Yeah, legend. So I've been to the brewery a couple times myself, and it's
Did you?
it's a bucket list experience.
It is. We actually had an episode where we did our bucket list breweries, and that was on there. So it's funny you say that. Yeah,
That's very funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't been, at least.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet. One day.
What was that
day,
like? Did you try the food when you were there?
Yes, I did. I tried. I've been there a few times. I've been to the tavern a few times, and then I've been to the actual brewery once.
Okay.
Which was the last time I was there, because they usually don't do brewery tours. They have some stuff in the summer where they have like a guided tour with the city, but otherwise it's mostly been to the pub. It's because I also work in the industry. I've been to Braubeviale a few times, which is a trade fair, which is in Nuremberg, and we often stay in Bamberg and then go to Nuremberg for the fair, and then go back and drink Rauchbier.
Yeah. That sounds
a very cool event.
yeah. It is pretty great.
Yeah, they had he was talking to us about the food that they make there, and like the history of the tavern and everything. And he was telling us about the Bamberg onion, one of their signature dishes that Alessandro he recreated at home, and he made it. I've been wanting to, but I haven't tried. But
Nice.
that looks incredible. That with like a big glass of the Martin or something must be just incredible.
I think I've tried most of the stuff they have on the menu, actually. I've not tried any of the vegetarian dishes because I know they have a couple, but I've tried both like the knuckle and the shoulder, and I've tried their sausages, and I've tried the onion. And
See? Wow.
a lot of it.
See, he's an experienced beer explorer for sure.
Yeah, he is.
I've been around.
You've been around, man. Yeah. So as somebody who tried it in the tavern, how was the onion? Because we were just like, we couldn't believe.
I think it's really good, but my favorite is the knuckle, man.
It's the knuckle?
Not the knuckle, the shoulder.
Shoulder.
So the knuckle is called Haxe, which is more of a Bavarian thing. And then Franconian, they have their own spin where they eat Schäufele, which is it's basically when you do like pulled pork. So you take this pork shoulder, and then it's only the shoulder blade, and they split it in two. So there's only 2 pieces from that cut, and then they leave the skin on top. And then they some places braise it and then roast it, and some places just roast it. Man. So it's like pulled porky and then crispy skin on top, and then old school grandma style gravy, and these potato dumplings they do in Germany. It's really nice. It's comforting. It feels like grandma food.
Yeah,
which is just great.
The best. It's just the best. We both have a million questions for you, and I'm sure this is going to be an awesome conversation. But we should crack open a beer. And I know. What beer did you bring?
A beer I brewed myself.
Oh,
nice.
Was it the porter? I saw your video where you had the porter.
No, it's a brand new beer. I packaged it yesterday. So
wow,
it is a lager inspired by lagers of Franconia in the area. This is a Rotbier.
Nice.
So Rotbier is a style that is native to Nuremberg, and it is a red lager. I wanted to crack this one because it's one of the lagers I've been the most excited about brewing.
Oh, nice.
And since it's just packaged yesterday, it's going to be pretty fucking great.
And did you design the labels and everything?
I do not decide. So I'm the head brewer. So the brewery I work at is called Bad Seed Brewing.
Oh, okay.
I'm the head brewer. So we have a label designer who does the labels, and it's kind of like in a kitsch German style. A lot of our lagers has this style here where it says Bad Seed on the front, and then it says Das Original, which is German for the original.
That's awesome.
And then usually like the style and whatnot, and then there's a bit of a blurb on the side about what it is, and then the label scheme is basically the same with a pattern where it almost looks a bit like Oktoberfesty or something.
Yep.
And then it's just changed color wise depending on what beer it is.
Alessandro, you had the Schlenkerla road beer recently, right?
I did, yes.
Oh yeah.
I had their, if I'm not mistaken, it's smoked with cherry wood instead of their classic beech wood. And I know Joe had their Schwarzbier with the smoked with elderwood, which also was interesting.
Got to try that one for the first time recently, which was incredible.
I really like both of those.
Yeah.
The red Rotbier was really damn good. I'm just trying to make a little bit of a slow pour head.
That's amazing.
We're really inspired by it. A lot of these classic styles at our brewery. We don't only do hazy IPAs and things like that. We really like to honor tradition.
Yeah.
So we like to brew stuff like this.
You know what?
It looks more red in real life, though. It's pretty dark on camera.
I like that it has like the almost like a beige brownish head too. You can tell.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right, Alessandro, what are you opening with? Because I have so many questions for him now. The more he says, the more questions I have. So
I was trying to think about beers that you could have looking at all the videos you've done. Obviously, you've tried a lot of different things. So I picked one that I don't think you've tried. I know the brewery. You've tried a few of them, Sierra Nevada, but it's their this year edition, the Hop Tropical IPA. It's called Hop Tropical because they're using only hops from the Southern Hemisphere. And it's their seasonal brew for January through March. So I thought that could be an interesting one to have here with you all today.
It sounds awesome. I mean, I love Sierra Nevada. Problem is, when Sierra Nevada gets over here, it's usually got a little bit of age on it. It's rare we get to find it really fresh. And then a lot of the seasonal variants do not make it over here. So it's most of the time it's like Torpedo and the Pale Ale, and that's about it. And then once in a while something will pop up, but it's not too often.
It's the same thing with me in Canada. We don't see much Sierra Nevada. We get not even the Torpedo, just the Pale Ale is the only thing that we get here. But every time if I go down across the border to the US, I'll get the Torpedo at least because I love that beer. But even then, in the northern states, so good, right? So incredible.
And so is the Pale Ale.
So is the Pale Ale. But you know what? I tried the Pale Ale first, and I wasn't expecting to like the Torpedo even more, but that blew me away. And I loved it. So I'm opening, my first beer here is from a local brewery here called Silo. And this actually will probably lead into my first question for you, Peter, because you mentioned something about your brewery that I found really interesting and that we've actually talked about a lot in the past couple of years. So what they do, they're very Czech and German inspired. So I don't even think they've ever brewed an IPA. They do a lot of lagers. They do a lot of, recently they started brewing, Dunkels and alt beers. And they're always experimenting with different styles. Did a Roche beer too, like a smoked beer. And so they're always expanding, but their basis is lagers. And they started off by doing really, really good sort of Czech-inspired Pilsners. And so they recently just released a new Pilsner that I haven't tried yet. And I'm a massive fan of their beer. I go down to their brewery. I live in Montreal in Canada, and their brewery's in this old, really hard to get to industrial area that's kind of really off the beaten path. There's not public transportation doesn't really get out that far. So you kind of have to take a bus and then walk a couple of blocks or drive, which isn't ideal, or take a taxi, one or the other. But so I get out there when I can. And their beers are incredible. Everything they do is just, the quality level is off the charts. But getting it fresh is key, to your point, like you were saying. And so normally I'll get cans to go at the brewery. This one I got a little bottle shop, but I'm excited to try this because their stuff is all really flavorful, really aromatic, and really fresh usually. So,
what did you say this was? A Pilsner?
Yeah, this is their Pils that they just released. It's a new recipe. So I'm excited to try. I think my first question for you, I think just because you mentioned this, so to build off that, would be, you said your lager, but it goes into your brewery, stays away from maybe just brewing hazy IPAs. and
we
doesn't
brew a lot
necessarily
of hazy IPA.
Yeah.
But we also brew other things.
Exactly. Yeah. So how do you lagers these days have become a little bit more trendy, right? I mean, we all know that the IPA craze was all the rage for a good portion of time there, and now it seems that lagers and pilsners are becoming a little bit more trendy, and you start to see microbreweries, at least in North America here, where we are, coming out with a little bit more of those. Do you have a general opinion about that? Do you feel as though the market might have been oversaturated with IPAs and all the different variations of it for a little too long, and now there's kind of a response to that going the other way?
Yeah, I think so. But first, I want to say cheers.
Oh, yes.
Because this smells really nice, and I'm thirsty.
Yes.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Nice to meet you.
Cheers. Nice to meet you guys.
Oh, well.
Well, I have to say,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I
you
was,
gotta make the beer
when I
noises.
brewed it.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
tell us a little bit about it. I want to hear your first impressions there.
it's pretty much how it was from the tank. So good. I really like it. It's it almost feels like it's a hybrid between if you've never heard of oat beer because it's an obscure style. I think a good like match would be somewhere in between a Vienna lager and a Märzen or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It has a little bit of the richness of the Märzen. It has a little bit of the lightness of the Vienna lager. And then depending on the brewery, it can also be kind of hoppy. And this one is a bit of both. It has like the rich malt character, but also a good amount of hop flavor. We use a malt called Red X, which is from a company in Germany called Best Malts, which is made for making red-hued beers.
Okay.
And then, which is similar to a Vienna malt, and then we use a touch of German crystal malt and some Munich malt and some things to layer like a rich, bready maltiness, and then German hops, classic hops. I think it's Tettnanger and Mittelfeu in this one, so it's really nice. I've been wanting to brew this for so long and researching the style and everything, and I think it turned out really good. I actually think it's one of our better lagers in recent times. So I'm really digging it. But getting back to your question,
Yeah.
Joe, is I think so. I think there's a bit of pushback. Maybe not a pushback, but an interest in it. But
An interest,
if we look at the European market, we're always a little bit behind the States. So it's slowly starting to happen now. West Coast is getting more popular here now again.
Yeah.
But like haze is king. Haze is everywhere. Like people want haze. But you're starting to see it. And you're starting to see this interest in people being sick of drinking the same thing over and over again. Yeah. And it makes sense because I think beer often is cyclical. So everything comes like in a wave and then just goes nuts and then it goes back to something else. And then it just keeps going like,
yeah.
So the motion of the ocean right now might be haze, but I think we're getting to a point where a lot of people are getting into the lagers, and we can definitely see it with our beers. So this is actually part of a project we have, which we call Braufrisch, which means brewery fresh in Germany, or in German. We just named it that to honor like classic beer and stuff like that. Although we're Danish, but it's a project where we work with bars throughout the country, and then like we package the beer, and then the bars get it like 3 days later and serve it on draft all over the country on the same time. So it's like a kind of official release day throughout the country.
That's awesome.
And that's really helped peak an interest in lagers. It's so fun to see in the beginning. Like there was a few bars on, but now like I think we're like 38 or 39 bars throughout the country, spread all over. That's awesome. Into this. And people get really hyped to go drink fresh lager, and it's awesome. Like that's nice. So cool to see. So I think it's definitely something that's happening. I think also it's starting to happen a bit with a lot of these modern hoppy lagers, like the West Coast Pilsners and whatnot. That's a easier gateway to get into it, I think, for a lot of people that's maybe like hop heads.
Yeah.
I think for sure it's something that people are starting to get into.
Well, that brings a question on my end. Må jeg lige spørge, hvor er du fra i Danmark?
What? Jeg er fra Aalborg, ja.
Ja, det er sjovt. Det er, hvor min familie er fra. Hvor i Aalborg?
Jeg har boet i Vejgaard. Jeg er faktisk fra Nørre Sundby.
Nå, okay, men så er det ikke rigtig Aalborg, ikke?
Ikke næsten. Er du fra Danmark?
Jeg er halvdansker, ja. Min mor er dansker, og ja, min familie er fra Aalborg. Min søster faktisk bor der i øjeblikket, altså Vi
What?
heldigvis det
Hvor
en hel
vildt.
dansker.
That is wild. I better switch back to English so people can understand
Yeah,
us. I did
I'll add
not know
subtitles to
this.
that eventually. I'll get you to help me with that. I've never
Wow.
heard you speak Danish before. That's impressive because you speak obviously Italian, English.
I did
Danish,
not expect that. It's like, what?
and you have a fourth language too, right?
Well, I learned a bit of Ukrainian when I was working
Ukrainian,
there, but it's very basic. I've forgotten most of it. At the time, I could speak it relatively okay, at least to get by, and basic conversation and daily. But now I've forgotten most of it.
Yeah.
I can still read the letters though. That's fun. Like you don't forget
Yeah.
that. So
That's crazy. And also Aalborg. Small
yeah,
world.
I had a feeling from I wasn't sure, and I'll be honest, like I'd obviously watched a lot of your videos, but your English is very good, so it's never really occurred to me. I'd seen like a flag in a couple of videos, so I thought like, and then Joe said, no, he's actually from Denmark. And I said, okay, well then we'll surprise him.
That was a good surprise. Did not see that one coming.
Well, my name
Yeah.
usually it's always funny when when I'm in Denmark or anywhere. I say, what's your name, Alessandro? And then they never assume that I can speak it, right?
No.
Like
People were probably thinking, "Oh, cool."
It's good you can
Did
spy
learn
on
that
people. Then.
Danish. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a friend who is part Greenlandic, and
Oh,
there's a lot of people from Greenland in this country as well. And we've experienced before on the bus when we were younger, like people from Greenland would talk about him because they could see he was part Greenlandic,
Exactly.
and he would just turn over and reply in Greenlandic, and they would be like, "Oh," because
like,
they
what?
thought he looked like he would only speak Danish.
Yeah. So sorry. Aside from that question, we'll translate. Like we're just talking about where he's from. It happens to be the same place where my family is from.
What? Really?
So yeah. It's in Aalborg in the northern part of Jutland.
Wow.
So it's pretty interesting. It's the world is
incredible.
it's a small place.
It's a small place.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up on the city we're talking about is split by a fjord, and then on one side of is the Aalborg, and on the northern side is the city called Nørresundby. And I was born at the hospital in Aalborg, but then raised in Nørresundby, and then most of my adult life lived in Aalborg, and then briefly in New Mexico as well.
Oh, really?
But
Nice.
yeah, pretty much been here all my life. Well, now I'm not in Aalborg anymore. Now I'm in a small city outside of Aalborg where the brewery is called Gudumholm. So that's pretty funny.
Well, that means now I have a brewery to visit next time I'm over there
Yeah.
to visit
Right.
family. I'm gonna have to come and check out the beers there. Like that's gonna make it
Yeah,
a
for
fun
sure,
trip,
man. Yeah, more than welcome.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
how long have you been involved with the brewery for?
4 years
Okay.
to this autumn,
Okay.
which is just crazy. Time's been flying by.
So, were you
My
always a brewer?
original-
Did you do something else before that?
No. My original. So when I started YouTube, I was a teenager, basically.
Right,
I was only 19.
Yeah.
The legal drinking age in Denmark is 16. So it was perfectly legal, nothing there.
Yeah.
But like if you go on the channel and then pick oldest, like it looks like a
Yeah.
kid drinking beer.
Yeah.
But my interest kind of started back then. Got really into all this, the world of beer. The first beer that kind of was the flicking the switch moment was an English golden ale with elderflower, which is just like really old school, old money. It was before hazy IPA and all these things. And in Denmark, the only like really American beer we could get was like Budweiser or maybe some Sierra Nevada or some Flying Dog. I think we could get that as well. And then a little while down the road, we started getting some more stuff. But that was like the flick of the switch moment. And then I went to college and studied to become a teacher with a major in English and media studies as my minor. And I did that for a long time. And then when I was done with my bachelor's degree, I went on to my master's. And in Denmark, when you go to look for jobs afterwards, we have like this security system where you sign up for it so that you actually get a monthly living wage from this security whilst you're looking for a job. But you have to have like
You have to be
proof that
actively
you actually
looking. Yeah.
Yes. And then after a specific amount of time, you have to go in at some kind of internship. And most of the time it will be related to your degree, which was what I was going to be doing. But I was like, I kind of don't want to do that. I was deep into homebrewing at the time. I had been homebrewing on and off. I even have a couple homebrew videos on the channel actually. And then I was like, hey, I'm going to ask this local brewery if they're looking for someone for an internship, if they're down for it. So I went there, talked to them, and then I got an internship. And that's kind of how I got into the business. And then fast forward, I think back then internships were 3 months. Now they're only a month. But 3 months after, the old brewmaster got fired.
Really?
And there was a second brewmaster there already, so he took his position, and then I got to jump in and take the old brewmaster's, or the second brewmaster's position. Kind of like I was a brewer trainee basically at that time, and I got a degree as a brewer included as well with the job. So that I was just lucky to get my foot in the door like that, and then I worked there for 5 years until I went to where I am now.
That's awesome. That's cool how that kind of works out.
If we can get like some more let's say scoops on how you're thinking in the future, what are there any projects that are coming, or any ideas for future projects?
I mean, the big thing, so we were really into old school beer. Because when we were getting into beer, both Frederick and I, what we drank was like English cask ales. We were lucky to have a English cask bar in our city called the Wharf.
That's amazing.
They actually have the cask mark from Camera over in England, so it's like a authenticated cask serving place.
That's nice.
There's only 2 in the country, and I think there's more in Europe now. But at one point, the only 2 places outside of the UK with that official cask mark was in Aalborg at the Wharf, and their sister bar in Copenhagen called Charlie's.
Wow!
So that was kind of where it all started. So I still have a big affinity for English beer, but as I said, everything is in waves and is cyclical. So for a long time, only haze, only hype. Beer could only be intensely flavored if it was easygoing, it was boring, not worth your time. And I think some beer geeks are, they get in that, they just want the most extreme they can get. Yeah. And then you follow that journey for a while, and then you kind of get fed up with it, and then you go back to something that's a bit more simple, and then you find out it's actually not simple. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's just soft, and it's complex, but it's easygoing in a different way. Like, there's loads of flavors in lagers. Yeah. It's just not like a hammer in your face, like, oh, here I am, hops. Yeah. You actually need to use time and to analyze and sit and think about it. But you also don't have to. That's the magic about it. You can also just like crack a cold one and be like, this is great pills.
Yeah.
Look at the sunset. You don't have to overanalyze it as you do.
you hit on so many things that we've talked about a million times there, man. One, cask ales. I just came back from a trip to the UK. I was in England with my family for 10 days. I did a tour of just different pubs trying different cask ales. I was so excited for that. And that was an amazing experience. So getting to try those for the first time, we did like an episode a couple of years ago where we explored Camera a little bit. Obviously, we don't have access to that here. There's some random microbreweries here and there that'll get one sort of like cask pump and they'll experiment with it a little bit. But in general, the English tradition of their particular kind of ales and bitters, like having those on cask, we don't have that here. So for me, getting to go there and try those was just absolutely incredible. But what you talked about there, that the sort of beer journey, that's something that we've been going over and just talking about nonstop for years. That's sort of when you start off exploring. We call it beer explore. Beer explorers. You're on an exploration journey, trying different beers. You start off with whatever beer got you into beer in the first place. When you're a teenager, it's whatever's cheap, whatever's accessible. And then there's one beer that sort of, like you said, sparks something for you, right? Something you try that's a little different, a little bit more challenging, a little bit more complex, but it does it for you, and that sparks your interest. Then you start trying and going from there. And so you try all the extremes, right? All the different possible styles. You get things that will punish you with extreme flavors and challenge your palate like you've never been challenged before. And that's what you're seeking and looking for. And that's what's exciting. And then it seems like everybody comes back to simplicity. Yeah. We've talked to brewers, we've talked to other beer YouTubers, we've talked to tons of people who all have the same journey where that's all amazing. And that's all great. And you still appreciate those styles. And that's still all what makes up the beer world, the canvas of the beer world. But then it comes back to appreciating the simplicity of a really good lager, a really good Pilsner. And that's not easy to do. Like you said, exactly. Right. Like you start to appreciate the subtleties in a good Pilsner things that you wouldn't have noticed when you were 18, 19 years old, but now you're able to sort of pick out like, oh my God, that little bit of citrus that they achieve at the end there is just really unique, and that's kind of really interesting. Or man, they got this really fresh maltiness to this lager that's really, I've never tasted something like this before, like this deep and balanced, like little things like that that you can appreciate that aren't easy to do. But yeah, it always comes back to simplicity, and I'm happy that a lot of breweries are embracing that now. Like this brewery here, like they have the Lucre taps, and they were one of the first
nice.
bars in Montreal to do that. So they have like a pour menu. You can go and choose one of their beers, and you can say, I want the all foam pour, I want it half, I want it like, and so there's 4 different sort of foam levels that you can order any of their beers on. And they really sort of try and educate and push and tell people about it. And they'll give you samples. They'll give you like a little glass of just foam when you order a beer sometimes. Like, here, try this. And, you know, if you want, you can order your next pint as just foam. It's like,
nice.
And that's awesome. I love that it's coming back around to that and people are appreciating it.
It's funny you mention it because I remember on the journey, if you could say it like that, I often met people who are like, you just wait a couple of years. You're going to appreciate lager. And I was like, no, it's boring. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I just need this triple dry hop hazy double IPA. I don't care about all that stuff. They were right. they were right,
man. They were right. Yeah.
Well, so jumping in there, I have a question for you, Peter. I wanted to ask you if you had to pick a lager. Let's stay in the lager family, but an easily accessible lager that you would say that either like sparked your interest in that, or one that you would recommend, say like that's one of my go-to. What would that be? It's like, it's fine if it's a local one, totally fine. Like, I just I'm curious.
It's so tough. I think if it's like from an industrial standpoint, where it's like brewed by big breweries, and it should be somewhat easy to get. You also have to like bitterness, but something like Jever from Germany or Flensburg Pilsner from Germany. Those are more industrial lagers, but those are super easy to get at a good jumping off point, and beers that are going to seem more interesting than the Pilsners you're maybe drinking otherwise, because they're more bitter. So like if you love IPAs, you're like, oh, this is kind of like bitter like IPA.
Nice.
But I think if we're saying easy, accessible, that's a bit more refined, at least in Europe, something like Tegernseer Hell or Augustiner Hell from some of the bigger family-owned breweries down in Bavaria, those are like really good. Those are Helles lagers, so they're a bit more easygoing than the Pilsners, but those are just like so well brewed. And I recently had Tegernseer for the first time, and I was just surprised how well the quality, how the quality held up for a bottle that was like 4 or 5 months. I was like, what? They have really good control over oxygen levels and everything in that product. So like those are some really good, especially for the pale lager styles that are somewhat easy to get. And I think both of those are also exported throughout the world.
Yeah, the Augustiner I tried recently. That was really nice.
I have one in the fridge downstairs. So case in point.
Augustiner is phenomenal. Like, thank you for your answer. I know it's always difficult. The most difficult answer or question you can ask like a beer explorer, a beer enthusiast is like, oh, if you had to pick one, which one would it be? It's like, oh my god, like that's impossible.
But if it had to be non-easy accessible, where it didn't matter, then it would be probably a toss-up between some... I have an affinity for hops. So it'd be probably a toss-up between something like Herrenpils from Käsmann in Bamberg, which is a really nice hop-forward Pilsner, or maybe something like Vinohradsky, which is a Czech brewery. They're 11, which is a Svetli Lechak Czech Pale Lager at 11 Plato. Those are magic beers. I think I've given both like 95s, world-class Pilsners. I think if you are getting into lager... The best thing you can do is save up money and go to Europe and go to Franconia.
Yes.
And travel around the Bamberg area, all the small family-run breweries, and visit them. And it's truly magic. It will open your eyes completely if they're not completely open. You go into these small family-run tavern that's been around for like 100 years, and all they do is just brew 3 beer varieties for the locals, and they're just so dialed in. And it's just magic. And like when you go into some of those tap rooms, everyone just like looks at you. They can immediately see, oh, They're not local. They're
You're not
tourists.
local.
Yeah, it's like that's just so magic. And there's similar things in Czech, but I've only been to Prague once, so it's hard to completely compare. But like the magic of Franconia is insane. And I've only been to like Munich once, and I also like that. But I feel like Franconia is just like the place to be when it comes to
it's a magic place.
And the thing is, like, a lot of those beers also travel so badly because, like, a lot of them are brewers that have been doing it for generations and are taught how to do it from family and whatnot. So when you drink it there, it's dead fresh and everything, no problem. But they're not like running on super crazy modern systems where they can keep oxygen levels super low and everything. Like, a lot of those breweries only give their beers shelf lives for 3 months, and they're like, that's it. Although they would probably be fine after, but that they have that emphasis on freshness too. So like, I can't speak highly enough of Franconia.
It's so funny that you say Franconia, because my answer would be a local lager here. It's not something easily accessible, but I was talking to Alessandro about this before, and I've mentioned this. This same brewery, Silo, they discontinued this particular lager recently, but my favorite lager I've ever had in my life was this one right here, and I happen to have a can on it. And it's they call it their lager beer, but it's a Franconian. It's really small, but it says Franconian style lager. That's so funny that you mentioned Franconia, because that was going to be my answer. Yeah. And this is absolutely delicious. I think what you mentioned about hop forward Pilsners, this one is very, very, and I don't know if this matches what you know of the Franconian style, but very simple in its complexity, but very fresh. So very strong, bready, deep bready malts and very present hops. I wouldn't say it's overly hoppy. It's very balanced, but very flavorful. You take a sip and there's so much character there. There's so much to appreciate, and it's very kind of deep, very deep in its flavors, and it's delicious. That's my favorite.
I mean, that's when people usually think of Franconia, they always jump to Kellerbier, because that's where the style comes from.
Yeah.
Where you know it's very famous, but in Franconia, like, people don't distinguish that. Like, they do their own thing. They don't care about your guidelines. They do their own thing. You go to a brewery, they have their beer, they call it Lagerbier. You ask them, oh, what style is that? Lagerbier. It's they don't care. And they will say ungespundet. Okay, does that mean it's a Kellerbier fermented without pressure? Ungespundet Lagerbier. They're just so in tune with, like, this is our world. You don't know. We don't care. And I think it's true. They have some more richness to them. They do a lot of different styles. I mean, one of the breweries I failed to mention, is probably my favorite down there, is Sintner, which is they do some beers called Münchenbacher. I've gotten to visit the brewery, which was really fantastic, and got a tour there as well. They do some of the most complex, delicate lagers, and they've been around for so long. And it's one of the things that, like, people are getting their eyes up for them now, but before lager was getting a bit more trendy, if you look them up on Untappd, like, the beers had averages of like 3.5, 3.6. And then you have, like, over in the States, Hill Farmstead making their first Pilsners, and people are like, 4.5, it's Hill Farmstead. It's just like, but Sintner's better. Like, I've tried the Hill Farmstead ones, but it's just because it's so roused in tradition. It's been around for a long time and whatnot. So, yeah, I think definitely the Franconian Pilsners, and also, for example, their take on Helles lager, it's a bit more rich in the maltiness. It's not as light. It also often has more hops.
Right.
They do a little bit their own spin on things. And then, as I said, they have all these weird descriptions between their styles. Zwickelbier is also from that area, which is also another obscure one. And then they have the Rauchbier and all that. Of course. This is almost sounding like a tourist advertisement for Franconia.
Man, I love it. It's like auditory beer porn.
You got me already at you got me at the first line. You go to Franconia. Yep, I'm in. So no, but it's very nice to hear your experience, because you clearly it sounds like it's not only it was fun to visit, but it's also, like, from a beer perspective, it probably, like, opened a new dimension for you, right? And I find, as a beer explorer or a beer enthusiast, that's something that anytime that happens, like, you just, like, are hooked, right? Like, because you find a new, almost like, way of appreciating beer, but also you find a new aspect of yourself of how, oh wow, I didn't know that this existed. And so that actually leads into my next question, since I was hearing how passionate you were describing that. Throughout your beer exploration history, what would you say were the moments that kind of like were defining for you? I heard you mention like obviously you were very much into hops, like heavily hopped, like, but if you had to pick like a few highlights, what would they be?
I think the highlights are almost always when you go to the source, when
Yeah.
you experience the beer where it's made, and you experience the culture around it, and you experience how the locals treat it and how everyone feels about it. And that's why like going to Franconia was so magic. It opened my eyes a bit. But like going to California for the first time, going to San Diego was fucking mind blowing. That's also one of my fondest beer memories. That also I already loved hoppy beer back then.
Did you go
but
check
it
out
was
the
one of
Stone Brewery
those.
down there?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
got to check out like a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Stone back then when Alpine was still independently owned. We went to Alpine, Ballast Point, a lot of the old money places, Port Brewing, Pizza Port, Lost Abbey, all kinds of places. So that was like a big eye-opening thing. Also, the first time going to New England, going to visit like Trillium, Treehouse, all these breweries. That was also eye-opening and amazing. And you're like, wow, this beer is even better than when I drink it at home, because I had traded for it and all this stuff. So I think a lot of times it goes with like actually going to where it's brewed and meeting the people behind it and talking to people and hanging out, and you find out like how social beer is. Although you geek out about flavors, that it's just enhances everything a bit more. I think when you go there and you talk to the people behind it and everything.
Beer's a social
so
animal.
That's 100%. So that's like some of the fondest trips just on the top of my head is like that. And also going to Prague for the first time was also really magical. That was for a collab, but it was amazing just hanging out with people from the Czech Republic that showed me around. And we went to the places where they were like, this is where you need to drink the beer. This is where you need to drink the beer. And it was just like already being into lager. That was also amazing. And, you know, trying the local foods and all those things, experiencing the culture around it, which is really cool.
That's so funny that you mentioned that. That's like San Diego specifically, because one of my big moments was going down to Stone Brewery specifically. When they first opened, they were in San Marcos, California, which is kind of like a suburb of San Diego. And they were in a little strip mall, and they just had this garage door that they would swing up every once in a while, and then people would go and fill up growlers. And my brother lived there, and we used to bike over from his house, and we'd bring growlers and fill them up and go back home. And then that's when I tried Arrogant Bastard for the first time, one of their flagship beers. And that was one of the beers that sort of opened my eyes to that. Was even, I don't think I'd even tried an IPA at that point in my life. IPAs hadn't, this was probably 2005, 6 maybe. So IPAs weren't really accessible or fashionable yet. And so trying that beer, and they had their own, the Stone IPA, and they had a porter. Those were kind of like the three. The porter had like a blue label on it. I remember them. Yeah, I just got hooked on the Arrogant Bastard. I loved it. It was like nothing I'd ever tried before. And it's exactly like you said, trying it there, like sitting at the bar and trying it, seeing how involved they were culturally in that little suburb of San Marcos, and how they were just a fabric of the nightlife there. Even like it was a destination. People would go there. And then they opened up this big campus in a place called Escondido, which was kind of in and around San Diego too. Yeah. And they have like the outdoor restaurant, the beer gardens with all the fires and all that. Yeah. That place is awesome too. That's an experience. But yeah, it was cool to see the revolution. And then, you know, of course they were bought by Sapporo, and then whatever happened. But yeah, that was it's funny that we both had like kind of those milestone moments in the same, in the same area, the same beer culture.
Yeah. San Diego is also one of the hotbeds of like the American beer culture, and or at least the modern beer culture.
It really was. Yeah.
And one place I don't even know how I could forget it, but going to Belgium and Brussels for the first time was also like huge. Like I've always loved Lambic, and then going to Cantillon and Driefontein and all these places to come and hanging out and drinking their beer there, and also touring the places and seeing how they're making it, and seeing how, again, it's drenched in history and tradition, and they're doing this how they've always been doing it, is also really, really magical. I've been there twice now, and it's just like all these places you go to, you're like, oh man, I can't wait to go back. Like, when you come home, it's like, oh, that was so awesome. I need to go again. So that's of course also what inspires, like bringing back a little bit, going back to the question about the beers we make at the brewery and stuff. A lot of these things are also part of that inspiration. And the same goes for Frederick, the owner. Like it's often when we've been on trips and stuff like that, that's also like the light bulb moments, and where you're thinking of that. We tried at our brewery to brew the beer we really like to drink, Although we also do a lot of stuff that we like, but it's something you also have to do these days to keep the lights on, because it's also a business. Because there's also something as, being too much of a jack of all trades. It would be hard to be really good at everything. Simply wouldn't have time for it.
You're right. There is a thing of being too much of a jack of all trades, and another one of those beer moments. And I think, Alessandro, I don't know if it was maybe the same for you, but a more recent one was going to this to Barry House, like this brewery in Tampa where Alessandro lives, and we did a tour of this brewery called Coppertail in Tampa. So we had an episode.
Coppertail.
Yeah, so we went behind the scenes at Coppertail and we did a tour and interviewed. I think the guy was their social media manager that was showing us around, but we did this little interview tour thing. And then at the end, we were talking to him and we're just like, hey, where do you guys recommend we go? What do you guys like to drink? We're going down that road. And he's like, you got to go to this place, Barry House. Like, we all go drink there when we're done our shifts, and they're just like a lager brewery. And they make amazing lagers. You should go check it out. And going to that place was a game changer for me because, one, they had like the Lucre taps, but they did this thing that they call the slow pour, which was basically filling the glass with foam, letting it settle, filling with foam, letting it settle. And so it takes 10, 15 minutes or whatever it is to pour a pint. But once you get it, it has like this almost nitrogen infused quality to it where the beer just takes on this whole other life and character, and the foam is so flavorful that's left in the mug.
That foam.
Yeah, and it's the most flavorful foam you've ever drank, and the beer it's incredible. And so that experience, that place, was one of those moments for me. And because they were focused, now they brew all different German-inspired styles, but they were focused on lagers, and that's kind of their slogan too. It's like #lagerlife is their thing. But focus, right? Focusing on one thing and doing that really, really well kind of has the biggest impact, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Getting good at something, dialing it in, doing it over and over. That's how you got to do it, especially in the world of brewing, because you're not going to nail it the first time.
Right.
You're not.
Right.
It's a process.
It is definitely a process.
Yeah.
I don't know about you two, but I'm close to empty here. I know maybe I've been drinking a little fast, and also we've let you. We asked all the questions that you.
Yeah, you've been doing most of the talking. We've been doing the
most
drinking.
of the talking. We've just been drinking here, enjoying sitting back and hearing your stories.
Yeah, man, you've been around. It's pretty amazing to hear. I didn't know to what extent your beer pilgrimage has brought you to all these different spots. Like you mentioned Three Fontaines and Cancillon, like a lot of the lambic breweries too. Like that's incredible that you got to go check those out too.
Yeah, and although we're talking about this like going back moment and stuff, like I still like a very good hazy IPA. Yeah, I still like a big barrel aged stout. I love to make barrel aged beer. Like that's one of the things we've been working at a lot at the brewery. But it's, now I have kids. Life is a bit different. Yep. You don't often gravitate to like a big barrel aged stout or a triple IPA that's triple dry hopped in the evening or something like that, because you have kids that's going to get up at 6 a.m.
That's right. I got to be up at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah. Or pale ale or something like that. You start to appreciate it more because of stuff like that as well.
Oh man, that's what I started. I love those low alcohol beers.
Yeah.
Like a good 3.5% ABV lager or something that you can find. Start to appreciate, because same thing. I have like a young daughter and another one on the way, so it's like I might be able to sleep until 7 tomorrow, but I might be up at 5 o'clock. I have no idea. So and barrel aged stouts. Speaking of, are like one of my favorite styles of beer. I freaking love barrel aged.
Same here.
I would love to have 2 or 3 or 4 of those at night and get really funky with it. But as for all I know, I'll have to be up 4 hours later, wide awake, full energy, ready to go. Yeah. Playing with a toddler.
A lot of these, but I also think a lot of these beers are more fun to share.
They are. It's not like a sit at home alone kind of beer, right? It's like you want to share with somebody.
Yeah, because you can sit and explore and geek out and be all like, "Oh shit, how'd you taste this?" And because we've done a lot of the stuff on the channel with friends. Yeah, like almost always had people over and we shared beer, and it's so much fun.
That's why we do what we do.
Channel as our bottle share, really.
That's a nice way to look at it.
We call this channel our virtual pub. We started it because we'd had virtual beers with each other, where we were presenting cool beers that we could find locally because we're in different countries to each other, and describe them and geek out over them. Exactly the same thing. Yeah, that's the genesis of our YouTube channel.
Yeah. I still love drinking those kind of beers. I mean, I have right up here on my cabinet where I have my glassware, I have a plethora of like hype bottles of stouts and stuff. I was like, oh, those were amazing. They go on the shelf and maybe I'll use them for decoration. Yeah. You just stand there. But so I still love all that stuff. But you just just really start to appreciate other things as well.
Well, I think it's to your point. Sometimes you reach a stage in your life where it's okay to have session beers, and it's you gravitate maybe every now and then for a special occasion or an event. You like you said, like you gather friends and you have like, oh, let's open this special bottle, right? Like, and more often than not, you're like, if you want a beer, like at the end, like the week, and you just want to relax. A good, well done session beer, whatever that might be, it could be an IPA, it could be a lager, but something that hits the spot, in my opinion, is quintessential. Like it brings it to another level. What are you closing your beer brackets with?
I talked about hype. I also like to drink hypey things. So I took something hype, but not strong hype.
Okay.
So you might have heard of this brewery from Portland. It's called Brewhouse.
I haven't. Have you?
You haven't?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess up and coming,
Okay.
if you can call it that. They've been around for quite a while now, but only a little over, is it a year or maybe 2 years now with a physical location.
Okay.
So the owner is Sam. I can't pronounce his last name because I don't speak Spanish. He worked at Great Notion in the past, if you know them.
I haven't heard that one either.
I haven't heard of them. Like
Portland Brewery, they make a lot of IPAs and some of the like pastry fruity sours.
Okay.
The beer that kind of made them famous was a pancake inspired pastry stout. But he's been around the Portland scene, and he started the Brewhouse brand as kind of like a thing on the side. And he is freaking him and his team is freaking talented. This is actually a creation of his lead brewer. But they make a lot of different things. They make a lot of hypey things, but they're also doing something that I love. They're trying to bring back the West Coast. So I got a West Coast pale ale to crack.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice.
He and the guys at Brewhouse really nail it. And then I'm a metalhead. I guess the shirt speaks for that. And they are a metalhead brewery as well. So all the artwork and everything gets me every time. I mean, you can just, I mean, that's
look at the artwork. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, this is the 5% double dry hop West Coast Pale Ale, and I think it's like Simcoe, Citra, and Mosaic hops.
Classic,
and then this is a new batch where they use their lot selected hops, maybe, because I think they just started crop selection this year, and crop selection is a big thing in the world of hoppy beer, because that's kind of what you need to get to the high level, like to select the best crops of hops.
Yeah,
and to do that, you need to use a lot of hops and brew with a lot of hops because it's often based on contract size. So like when you brew IPAs and all these things, often these hop brokers and hop producers, you can buy it through them on something called the spot market. But the spot market is filled with all kinds of stuff. So when you order Citra from the spot market, for example, you'll get whatever Citra lot that worker at the warehouse picks randomly in a box. Or a random box. So you don't have the same level of control. There's a couple of new companies now that are trying to do a little bit where they tell these are the lots we have available, and then you can pick like that. Okay. But most of the time, the way you otherwise do it is like you do a contract-based way of purchasing hops. So you say, okay, in 2025, I'll need 200 kilos of Citra. I'll need 150 kilos of Mosaic, whatever. And then there's a couple different requirements about the amount you need to contract in order to be able to select your lot. And the way that happens traditionally is that you go to Yakima, for example, the Yakima Valley, and you go there and you go to selection, you go through the fields when things are being picked, and you get to smell and rub the hops and figure out which one works for you. Or if you're based far away, they will send you some of these available lots, and you'll go through them and figure out which one is the one you like the most. And that's what sets apart breweries that make good IPAs and world-class IPAs. It's like the ones that make the best IPAs are the ones that are able to lot select. And a lot of breweries have tried to circumvent this selection by saying, okay, I got this amazing crop of Citra or Mosaic, whatever. So when they got that from the spot market, they've told their sales rep, that lot I just got, can I buy that again? And then been doing it like that to try and replicate the same flavor, because you'll be amazed when you smell hops and use hops in brewing how different lots are.
Yeah.
If you have a mosaic that's been sitting for a bit too long on the vine, and it goes like, so when you harvest hops, you harvest through a seasonal period, and I think the span is like around a month, and then there's the early part of the harvest, the mid, and the late. And if you go too far in the late, you start to get into a lot of these earthy, garlicky, oniony flavors, and like you don't want that. That's kind of usually what brewers stay away from. For example, if you're looking at mosaic, you want that kind of blueberry, fruity, dank, citrusy, awesome hop. So to just be able to get that like at a constant rate, people do these kind of selective contracts, and that's a point I think they're at now at Brewhouse. So that's why also their quality is really high.
Nice.
That's awesome.
It smells amazing, this one, by the way.
I'm sure it does.
And it's really dank.
Love that word,
Like
dank.
a bag of weed.
You gotta go quick then, so you can enjoy that without having So I'm actually
the Reef Donkey,
opening-
nice.
Yeah, with a local. I don't know if you've had this one from Tampa Bay Brewing Company. We happened to go visit their brewery here in the last visit that Joe paid me here in Tampa. We went and talked with the head brewer, Anthony, and he gave us a phenomenal tour, explained a little bit of how they make their beers, and had us try like some of the different ones. And this is one of their staple ones. They label it as an American Pale Ale, and it uses like a very interesting combination of hops. The blend is Motueka, Equinaut, and Citra, which I thought like is a bit of a unique twist to it. It's a local one here from the Tampa Bay area, so I didn't see it on your channel, so I thought like it could be interesting like to discuss.
I've never tried it. I've heard of the brewery, but I never tried anything from them. Tampa Bay Brewing Company. It rings a bell.
They make really tasty IPAs.
Yeah.
Their stuff is awesome.
There is I've tried a lot of Floridian, I guess, beer.
Floridian. That works.
I mean, one of the early breweries for me that I was really excited about was Cigar City.
Cigar City's amazing, yeah.
Cigar City was one of the craziest back in the day. Hunapu was one of those first knock your socks off moments. For me.
They're amazing. They expanded a lot in recent years. Like they have an airport location now in Tampa. They have a couple around the city, right, Alessandro? Like 2 or 3.
They're the same.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's
color is really pale. It's like I think a lot of breweries are gravitating to these really pale hoppy beers these days.
Yeah. I'm sticking with the same brewery, Silo, and these are 2 of their new releases. So the pills that I just tried, and they just released a Helles as well. These are brand new on the shelf. I've been a big fan. I've tried all their beers. My favorite is probably their Dunkel. They make an amazing Dunkel, but these 2 I haven't tried. So this is really exciting for me too. Trying them for the first time. The pills I just had was incredible. Very citrusy, very hoppy pills. I'm interested to see their take on a Helles lager and how much character they're going to be able to pack into this. Because like you said before, traditionally Helles lagers are a little bit more light in character. So
more refined, I guess.
More refined, yeah. So I'm curious to see what their interpretation of it is.
Well, can we say skål?
Yeah, skål. I couldn't help myself. Sorry. I was really intrigued by the aromas of this one.
The aromas pulled you in. Oh my god, this is
really
amazing.
Man. That also kind of coming back. I miss the West Coast IPAs so much.
Yeah.
Man,
right?
When I started getting back into them, it was like, man, I forgot how good this stuff was. Especially these kind of more modernized takes on them, where they're not loaded with crystal malts and cloying and sweet, like where they're more dry and really hop forward.
Yeah.
And maybe just more in line with the San Diego West Coast IPA, because I remember the San Diegan IPAs back in the day also being more fruit forward and dry and dank and whatnot. But it's definitely changed. West Coast IPA is not the same. Even Pliny the Elder is not the same. People just don't know because it's happened so slow. Vinny from Russian River is talking about the beer in a lot of podcasts, and he's like, yeah, that's not the same. I just tweaked it very, very slowly to modernize it so people wouldn't notice. So if you look at pictures from Pliny the Elder from back in the day, it's like orange, and now it's like pale yellow. It's like It's just been so slow that no one noticed.
That's crazy. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I find also interesting from the brewer perspective, and you can probably give us more insights, right? Like on how do you keep up with trends, and what does that mean in terms of adapting? What thought process goes into that? Because I guess we've never really thought about that. Like really said, we haven't had a chance to talk with anyone that has the perspective from the brewers.
Well, I think it really depends on the brewery. Like some breweries do not want to follow trends; they don't care. They just focus on what they do well, be it lagers like the silo stuff you're drinking or something like that. Or some brewers try and ride these waves and try and build on what's hyped and what's popular to grow and expand and all this stuff. And I think it kind of depends on what you're into, what you're up for. For us at Bad Seed, we definitely do modern stuff and we modernize and we do modern things, but we don't do it for the sake of a hype or a trend. We do it if we actually like it. Like we both at the brewery hate smoothie and pastry sours, so we're never going to brew a smoothie and pastry sour. Although it would sell. Well, never say never. If you get the right collab and people convince you, then sometimes stuff like that will happen. Maybe the trends are fine and like it brings a lot of cool things forward. But I think a lot of the times also some of it is just a lot of marketing too. I mean, there's so much marketing behind a lot of these things. Like, there's a couple breweries now in Scandinavia that's starting to do like milkshakey stouts where they're actually more brown than black, and they're loaded with coffee creamer and they're flat. They're drinking like frappuccinos and stuff. It's like, I don't want to make that. I don't want, but it's people are loving it and they're going ape shit and they're like, wow, this is like drinking a frappuccino. It's like, why don't you just buy a frappuccino and pour vodka in it?
Exactly. Yeah. Like pour some whiskey in a frappuccino and just get it over with.
Yeah, but that's also like a little bit of like an archaic old brewer, view on it, because beer should also be fun, because beer is fun. It shouldn't only be old man stereotypes, because a lot of the things that made beer what it is now is also experimenting and moving forward and trying new things. But I think it's also because craft beer is, at a point now, because it's still a young movement, where in the early days, ever since the early days, it's been about pushing boundaries, doing extreme things, and setting yourself apart from what already was. And we've been at it for so long that, like, when you hit one level of extreme, it's like, okay, then we need to top that somehow, and then we need to top that, because it's always, craft beer has always been about like the next big, the next big, the next big. Topping so all of a sudden you go so. Right now we're so high on the ladders. Like, we're almost putting so much fruit in the beers that we can't put any more fruit in for the beers still to be liquid. Like, so there's also a case of too much, I think. But that's why you also see the pushback. That's why you're seeing people like, I want to make West Coast IPAs instead. I want to make lagers and all that. So, and I think there should be room for everything, because beer is fun and beer is awesome when it's diverse. We wouldn't want to go back to a time where we could only drink freaking light lagers and big beer.
Of course.
So there should be room for both. So I think it's just we're getting into a point where it's splitting up a bit, and beer is finding, it's almost diverging from a subgenre into different subgenres, almost like music.
That's right.
Like, I go from, like, I'm a metalhead. Metal is not heavy metal. There is so many weird branches in the in the style of music. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing, because it's also a subculture and a counterculture. And in subcultures and countercultures, you see all these transitional movements where things blur lines and turn into something different. So I think there's a lot of like relation when you look at it with craft beer to subculture and music and whatnot.
That's a really
in terms of how it's evolved.
Really good point to make, and I agree with you 100%. And I don't think, like you said, maybe people going back to West Coast IPAs or going back to lagers is kind of like the counterpoint to it going really extreme on the other end. But you need everything, like you said. You need the innovations to push the concept of what beer is, and to come up with something new. Everything that's tried might not be amazing. It might not stick. It might be a flash in the pan that's around for 3, 4, 5, 6 months and then completely disappear, which is fine. because it's something that existed at that point in time. And
who
was
remembers
there.
Black IPA?
Yeah, oh, jeez. Those were. I used to have this beer of the
them.
month subscription when I lived in Ontario. My wife got me as a Christmas present, and every month they would send like a 12-pack of local craft breweries in Ontario where I lived. And there was always at least 3 black IPAs every time.
Yeah.
There was just a period of time where black IPAs were everywhere. Yeah. Yeah, I like the fact that the comparison to music is amazing. Like you were saying, like the genres of metal, right? You know, black metal, thrash metal. And it's like, it's not just heavy metal, just like there isn't just craft beer, right? There's going to be the people who might not ever get into brewing lagers and want to really push the boundaries and with the pastry stouts, and that's totally fine. That's what they're going to do. And then there's the breweries that are going to focus, like this one, focus on lagers and maybe just on German or Czech inspired beers, which is great. That's for the old school purists, right? Or people who are curious about lagers. It's fantastic. And then Tampa Bay Brewing Company, the one Alessandro is drinking, they're very IPA focused, and that's what they do. That's what they love. That's what they do well. And they're not. When we were there, they didn't have any. Did they even have any lagers on the menu? I didn't even think they didn't have a stout on the menu. I don't think. Like
no,
it was
I don't
very.
think they had any lagers. Like no, they're definitely IPA focused for the most part,
which is great because they do it well. And you know that if you go to Tampa Bay Brewing Company, you're going to get some delicious IPAs, and you go there for the IPAs. And I think that's totally fine. That not everybody's trying to do everything, and that people are starting to splinter off and create these different sort of subcultures within craft beer and do one style or one inspiration, like traditional German beer, traditional Czech beer, and explore all the styles within that and do that really well. I think that's amazing because then you have choice, and then you can learn about all these different styles, and you can go to one place because they're really good at one thing. That's great.
Yeah, you want diversity. Like it would suck if we could only drink the same kind of beer or listen to the same kind of music or any art. The diversity of everything is what makes it magic. So, we should appreciate all the people putting in loads of bananas and pumpkin pies or whatever into their kettles. And not only toot the horn of the lager.
Right.
No, that's a good point. Going back to YouTube, I was curious.
We haven't talked about YouTube at all.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you started and like how your channel experience has been? Like, is that something also we kind of like got on a tangent there? Like it was very fascinating, but we also want to hear about your story.
If I did not start a YouTube channel about beer, I don't think I'll be doing what I'm doing today. I think the move to make YouTube was what defined me getting into the beer industry and getting so passionate about it. And actually starting YouTube was the thing that made me figure out what my passion was in life and what I wanted to do. Because you kind of like in school and everything, you fumble the football a little bit. A lot of people drop out, they try different things. You're figuring out as a young person what you want to do with your life. Yeah. And when you're young, there's like endless possibilities and you have no clue. Like when I started studying to English major in university, the only reason why I chose English as a major was because it was what I liked the most in high school and because I was good at it. It was not because I was passionate and into it. I liked some arts in English. I liked literature. I liked movies and things like that. That's why I did media studies. But there was not that thing where you're thinking like, wow. And then I think I also found out I really like creating things, like with my hands, and also, your brain, because beer is a lot of both. Because there's something about like dialing something in and getting into that process and making it where you're like satisfied. Although that's really hard, you're almost never satisfied. So I think the whole the reason why I'm at where I am now is because I started YouTube and kind of figured out what I wanted to do. Because when I started, it was just for fun. I was really young. I was interested in beer. I knew like nothing. I was a really big noob. I'd been homebrewing a little bit with my dad, and I'd been trying the odd beers. Like it was, I had that light bulb moment before I started the channel. And then I discovered this local bottle shop with all these different beers. And then I casually one day just searched on YouTube because YouTube was a new thing around 2000. When did YouTube start? Is it 6 or something like that?
2005, I think 6, around there.
Yeah, I think it was around the time I started high school, YouTube got off its feet. And then I was, you started watching YouTube. And then one day I just looked up beers on YouTube, and I found out that there was this small community of people who did beer reviews. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And at the time, I was already doing Rate Beer, which was before the big thing before Untapped, which is unfortunately now no longer existing. They just closed down the servers a couple weeks ago, I think. So I was logging on Rate Beer, and I really found the format of sitting and writing tasting notes and all that really boring. Like, I didn't like doing it. But the idea of just sitting and enjoying it in front of a camera and trying to talk to some people about it was really interesting, because I like already, talking with my friends about it, but no one in my friend group at the time was really as into beer as I was. So I was, okay, well, then we can do this on YouTube and try and do it like these other guys and comment on their videos. And that's kind of how it started. And then, you start doing this, and then you start getting ideas about, oh, I'm going to go to this country. I should make vlogs there. And then it kind of just rolled, turned into what it is today, where it's, a channel with a lot of fucking content.
Speaking of which, how often do you film for the channel?
Usually once a week or so. Yeah. Like these days, it's like I have a channel sponsor. I have like a few breweries once in a while that sends me beer and stuff, and people who want me to try their beers. Yeah. So I really try to watch what I drink as well, because when you work in the beer industry and beer is your hobby, you really need to think about what you're doing. Yeah. So I try to keep it to once or twice a week, and then I will shoot videos. At that time, back in the day, it was just getting friends over and we shared everything and no problem. These days, it's like I think a little bit about it, and sometimes, I'll tip away the beer, because it's like I can't do a session and drink 10 beers, or that's also a bit crazy. But like shoot 5 videos. Yeah. And if you had 5 half-liter cans and you slammed everything, you'd be pretty, flying, especially if it was IPAs. Yeah. So, it's no secret that I don't drink all the beer I review, unless it's something that I'm mind-blowing about and stuff like that. But I usually try to just save like the really crazy stuff for sharing with friends.
Okay, so you post like every day for the most part? So you'll film a whole bunch once a week, and then...
Yeah, I usually have a back catalog. Whenever I get the time to do some stuff, I do it. Shoot some videos, and then I just kind of build up a back catalog, and then I try to post usually once a day. Sometimes there's a couple of days where I don't post, especially after having kids. Yeah, you don't get to do it as often. But now that the kids are a little bit older, and sleeping at night. It's easier to get time to do it as well. So,
how old are your kids?
They are turning 2 this summer, so they're still very small.
Are they twins?
So,
oh,
yes.
Wow, that must have been a challenge. I can't even imagine.
Still is.
Yeah, we were, before I had kids, where I was like, because we were a little bit older. We were like in our late 30s when we had our daughter, and so it's kind of like, oh, it'd be nice to have twins, because then you get 2 out of the way. And because we didn't start younger having kids, and then when we had our daughter, we're just like, oh my god, if we had 2 of these right now, it would just be I don't even know what we would do. Like, we would have to just call in all our family and just be like, SOS, come help us, because we can't.
Yeah, we've had a lot of help from family.
Yeah, that's
which
key.
has been
that's
great.
Key.
But one of the big things, we also don't know anything else, because this is our first kids.
True.
All we know is twins and twin life. So, but it gets easier when they get a little bit older. Like, I think the hardest part was in the early start when they're tiny. That was the hardest part, because there's so many demands. Yeah, like one wakes the other up. It's like, oh Jesus. Yeah. Now it's more like they can keep themselves occupied a little bit, but you gotta watch them, because they're in everything. Opening drawers, looking for things, tearing things apart. But that's just, their age. So, but you get used to it. That's also the weird thing. You get used to
Humans
it.
Humans adapt,
really
right?
hard.
You get used to everything. Whatever the situation
in the beginning,
is.
it was so crazy. And I was like, what
you're so sleep deprived. You're so tired.
Yeah. That's the worst part, is the lack of sleep. Yeah. Then you start to get used to it. And it's like, oh, this is life now. Okay.
Yeah. And then you see a picture of yourself and you look like shit, and you got big black bags under your eyes. And you're like, that's how I look now? Yeah, because I haven't slept in 7 months. That's why. But
You're like, oh, that's why I'm starting to get gray hair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sorry for all the kid talk, Alessandro, but it's just,
No,
it's,
it's
I
quite
relate.
right.
I relate because it's as a beer explorer, as a YouTuber, as a beer YouTuber, it's something you got to consider when you're filming, how often you're filming, what you're drinking. Because, like you said before, it's not like you're a single guy in your 20s, where you can just there's responsibilities. You're going to have to get up at a certain time and be full energy at 5:30 a.m. if they're up. So like there's no being hungover in that situation because you're just fucking yourself over. And there's
hangovers with kids is the worst.
It's the worst. Like... It's the worst thing in the world because you have somebody yelling in your ear for 12 hours and like there's you can't take a break. You can't just go, I'm going to take a nap. I'll see you in 2 hours.
You
when can't do
asleep. You crash. It's like
yeah, exactly.
Melt. You cease to exist for the night.
Yeah, I've definitely as a parent had to monitor that and be careful about that. But there was one time I can think of, it was a wedding and I had the worst freaking hangover since I've had my daughter. And that was just a nightmare because we were traveling too. So we were taking a plane. It was a whole thing. It was not, it was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a beer memory as well.
It's a beer memory. Oh, it's a beer memory. It is. Many beers memories were consumed that night because it was hot as hell, and many beers were consumed.
Yeah,
it's good times. Good times. That's interesting because I find that kind of posting schedule. What we do, and we do this just by necessity because it's kind of like it's not our full-time job. Obviously, this is kind of a hobby for us. And just the style of our episodes are a little bit more, there's a little bit more editing that goes into it. So it takes a little bit more time. And so we post about once a week on average. Sometimes it's maybe once every 10, 11 days. But I'm always fascinated to see other YouTubers who do like the daily posting like that and who keep like a constant engagement up. That's amazing because then it's like you're training people to expect that episode. They know to look for it. So if they listen while they work or they half watch while they work, whatever it is, or they take 10 minutes and watch it on their lunch break, they know to expect it and they know it's there. And that's like a whole other thing completely. Whereas with us, I think it's more like people kind of don't really know when we're, because it could be 7 days later, it could be 2 weeks later. I don't know. So it's kind of, maybe we lose people in that way, but it's just out of necessity because we just choose to do kinds of episodes where it requires editing.
But I think there's also something like when, like, for example, when people send you beer, it's like when they send you, especially when it's people who follow the channel, subscribers, they send you beer that they spent money on. You feel like, I have to do something about this. I can't just drink it.
Do you give them your home address?
I have done that in the past.
Really?
I've visited many of my subscribers. Some of my really good friends started as subscribers.
That's cool.
And now they're some of my best friends. Like it seems like when I studied in the States, my trip, I studied in New Mexico. And then afterwards, the only reason why I picked New Mexico was because it was closest to California. Like I could pick a handful of universities around the States, and I could pick UNM. And I was like, oh, that's close to California. Then I can travel to California and explore the beer scene. It's like, okay, maybe you should get into the beer industry. So on that trip, I stayed with some subscribers I'd only talked to online. I stayed with some fellow beer tubers from that time and whatnot. That's awesome. It seems crazy to think of it, with like YouTube, how big it is these days, and like you of course have to be careful. But I never experienced anything, negative at all.
I'm gonna jump in there and just say something Joe and I always say whenever we talk about beer and beer people in general, as we refer to. Beer people are good people. We've never ever had a bad experience with beer people. Usually people that are passionate about beer are open, they're friendly, they're happy to talk about it, they're welcoming, and what you're describing is exactly what we have experienced. Like obviously not to the extent that you have, obviously you have way more experience than we do.
It's so true. I mean, and it's funny that you guys say beer people are good people, because when I was in San Diego, fellow YouTuber who doesn't do content anymore, what's called Stumpy Joe Jr. on YouTube. His name was Ryan Rashan. He even had him and Greg Cook of Stone made a series of fake videos where Ryan would make a video where he said one of Stone's beers was trash. And then Stone responded. And then they had like this back and forth where it ended up with a video where Greg Cook tackled Ryan in a beer review or something like that. It was funny. But he said the same thing. He's like, beer people are good people. And it's so true. Like the last time I was in the States was in 2018. And I was actually with family, but I told them, okay, we're was my mother and my sister and her boyfriend. And the plan was to, everything we paid for ourselves. And it was like we wanted to go back to the States because we have family there. So we traveled there. It's like when we're here, I actually also would love to do something on my own if it's okay. So we tried to schedule something where I could go. Like that was when I went to they wanted to go to Vegas, and it's like I've been to Vegas 3 times. I don't need to go to Vegas again. I'd like to go to New England. So like we split up the trip.
Yeah.
And then we met up in California. So we went to Disneyland actually in Anaheim. And after the day in Disneyland, we were going to visit family in San Luis Obispo. And I was like, I would like to spend a day or two around here because there's some breweries I'd like to check out. They're like, yeah, sure. We'll meet at our family's place. And so they left from the hotel, and then it was really close to Bottle Logic, if you know them.
Yes.
He has a bottle. Ah, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah, I've been. Great brewery.
So, one of the first breweries that really put barrel aged stuff on the map, and people got really hyped about. Oh, well, not the first. At least maybe pastry stuff.
They had a really cool location in Anaheim when I went. I think that was probably maybe 2010.
That's where I went.
When I was down there,
So I went there, and then of course did videos, and then casually a guy and his father came up to me and chatted because they followed me on YouTube. And it was so random. It was like, oh, great, awesome, you're here, and we drank some beers together, and like they were there to pick up their allocation of some barrel aged stout, and they're like offered me to buy one of them because you couldn't buy them. It's like, what? Awesome! Now I can bring some home. And then they asked me, it's like, so what's your plan for the day? It's like, I'm hitting up some breweries here around LA, hopefully, and I'm probably just gonna take the bus, or I don't know. Somehow I'm going to get there.
Take the bus
in LA. Yeah, or the train. Yeah, hey, I'm European.
Yeah, exactly. The European in LA. I'm going to take the bus.
And they're like, okay, you're going to do that. Well, we're going to go to Monkish next. Do you want to join? I was like, yes. So I just hitched a ride with them.
Nice.
And then we went to Monkish. And then we hang out at Monkish. I knew the head brewer at the brewery next door, which was called, it still exists, called Smog City. And we went there afterwards, hung out.
Smog City.
And then they're like,
too. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So, and then we're hanging out there through the day and everything. We're talking. It's like, so how are you gonna get to what's your plan and stuff? Are you staying in LA? It's like, no, I actually need to go to San Luis Obispo. Oh, okay. Well, we live in Santa Ana, so we can drive you home. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, is this real life? It was amazing, and I've had loads of experiences like this throughout my YouTube career, where you meet either people who are subscribers or just people who are into beer, where they're like super kind and willing to do all these things and help out and whatnot. It's just like, you don't expect that from strangers. At least where I'm from. In Denmark, we can be a bit more, in general in Scandinavia, we're a bit more reserved, we're a bit more held back. So you don't expect people to act.
Yeah.
So you're always like, well, that would be great.
It's beer people are good people. I stick by that. Like, I think it's the reality of it. It doesn't matter what culture, where you are. If you're into beer and you're into that like social aspect, that community, and you really enjoy like having that shared experience, usually good things come from it. And I think that's also something we try to do with here on our channel. Is like kind of enhance that, like, and bring that to the forefront, and take away a little bit of the negativity that comes, like, and take the positive spin of it, and also focus on the community, right? Like, in being together. That's where the home pub or the virtual pub, the Beer Brackets pub, come from.
Nice. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, we've had great conversations with people, everybody from fellow, like, we've been doing these kinds of things. Like, obviously there's nothing new to recording a virtual call like this, but we've been doing it for 4 or 5 years now, since the beginning. And we've talked to everybody from fellow YouTubers to our friend Nate, who is a subscriber as well, who comes on sometimes. And he has his own channel where he did beer reviews for a little while too, but now he's mostly does hiking videos in New Mexico. Funny enough. Oh. Great guy. One Man's Odyssey. Awesome channel. You should check it out.
Nice.
Big call out to Nate. But then, we've talked to this guy, Steve Gilson, a couple of times, who's the global head of quality for Guinness. And we've had some really fascinating conversations with him about that industry and the big machine that is Guinness, and all the thought and effort and detail that goes into what he does, and what, Diageo does behind the scenes. It's kind of super fascinating talks we've had with him. We've talked to the official Guinness archivist. They have a archivist on staff, Evelyn. We had a long talk with her. That was really, so people of all different, and brewers, of course, but everybody's nice. Everybody's cool. Everybody has a certain humility to them. I think when you're in the beer industry, I think some people can take a certain amount of, and everybody can be pretentious to a certain degree if they want to. There's people of different personality types, and there's definitely pretentious people in the beer world. But
even there's definitely been a case of bad apples. That's been talked about on social media as well,
right? But in general,
but that is in all industries,
and that's everywhere. Exactly, that's just people in general. Some people, when they're very into something, are going to take it to a level where they're not so gracious about it, so it comes off as pretentious. That's just human nature, but in general, beer people are extremely cool because there's a social aspect to beer, like we've talked about. There's a sharing sort of communal aspect to beer that I think other liquors and other alcohols have a little bit of, but not to the same extent and not in the same way. There's kind of like a casualness to beer that I think attracts a certain personality type. And so
it's more of an everyman's drink.
Yeah, exactly.
Although there's, a lot of things in craft beer that makes it more expensive and all these things, but it's still not like, if you get into beer, it's still, if you want to hunt the craziest stuff, you can probably still afford it. But whereas if you get into wine and you get so into wine that you want to try like Petrus wine from Bordeaux, it's like, that's going to run you $1,000 or like $5,000 or like something a bottle.
Yeah.
Like, it's more pretentious and it's more about, it's a bit more snobbish and whatnot. And like beer is just much more approachable and down to earth.
Definitely.
I think so. Absolutely. Although some people are trying to do that about beer. There's been a lot of fun people coming in and trying to cash in. I mean, there's been a lot of these like uber expensive beers and they're nothing special. There's just like people trying to put that wine thing on it.
I know. There's this, it's funny enough, a friend of mine messaged me the other day, my friend Dave Alessandro, who I tell you about, who makes his home brews and gives them to me. And there's this local bottle shop in the city here, Montreal, where it's kind of like a little corner store where they specialize in like, kind of like local craft beers. So they get a lot of stuff in that you can't really buy anywhere else. And I like to go browse there sometimes and see what they have, because they have some cool imports too, some cool European imports that I can't get anywhere else too. And he sent me a picture, and there's this Quebec brewery that apparently is very well known. And their shtick is basically that their beers are just really hard to get. And they market themselves as being very hard to get. And apparently the beers are good. They're delicious. They're great beers. It's called Oval, Auval. That's the name of the brewery. And they're here in Quebec.
I haven't heard of it.
And so this little shop posted a picture to their Instagram saying, we just got a shipment in. And so they posted like, a bunch of cases. And they sell their beer in wine bottles, of course. And they're called... each box was called a cuvée, which is basically a harvest. That's a French word for harvest. So it's like this harvest of Pilsners, this harvest of IPAs, and it's just this kind of like pretentious language around it. That's, and everything from serving the wine bottles to the rare, the scarcity, the forced scarcity of it, not really distributing it too much. And there's that side of things that are kind of, and paying $20 for like a wine bottle size of beer too, Canadian, which is just kind of like, okay, it's good. It's great. I've tried one before. They're really tasty, but is it worth $20 Canadian and kind of driving to seek it out? That part of it is more the aura that they build around it, right? And sort of the exclusivity of it, which is starting, I find, to sneak a little bit into the beer world too.
Mm-hmm. It is deep in the beer world. I mean, there is, I will say I've spent a lot of money on some different bottles when I was on the big curve of my hype journey, or at least I think before it was buying stuff, it was trading. So like you were like, it's like to drink that beer, you need like 8 bottles of Cantillon Lambic for 1 bottle of beer, for example. Wow. It's like, I'm going to do that because I want to drink this.
Yeah.
So I've definitely been there, and I think there's definitely some of that in the beer industry, and there still is. But one of the big things that kind of killed hype a little bit in the beer industry was the disease we shall not talk about on YouTube. COVID.
Right.
Because what was interesting, breweries were forced to, really push and sell beer themselves. Yeah. And especially in the States, I know a lot of places where shipping in the state of alcohol was illegal, was made legal to help local businesses. Yep. And for example, in California, that stuck around. So now most of these like breweries that were really hyped for IPAs, for example, like Monkish and stuff like that, they started just shipping beer throughout California. And then all of a sudden people was just like, oh shit, you can just order it online.
Just order it, yeah.
And I was like, and that's always been the thing in Europe. So Europe, we've never had that like line mentality, and going to your local brewery and sleep over to mule cases to bring home to flip for expensive secondary prices. We never really had it the same way, besides with maybe the lambic and a couple like select bottles of stuff. But like that seems like it was at least somewhat killed because beer became more available. It's like there's something to this availability thing. Like if there's something that's unavailable and you really want to try it, like you got to make the effort. You're like, oh, I really want to try it. You're trying to do everything you can to try it. But then when it's all of a sudden available, you're a bit more like, oh, I can just get it. So I'll just get it whenever. So I don't need to chase. I don't need to hunt.
Yeah, once you remove the hunt from it, it removes what makes
and
it
it's
special.
like people just like they drift away a little bit. So I think that's interesting because you really saw that with like, I especially know California. There's like so many acclaimed hoppy beer breweries. They just started doing web shops and selling in state, and it happened in many other places as well. I think they also did in New York and stuff like that. And like, it just became a different story. With all that, and I think there's something with beer. I mean, and pricing and everything. I know some beers are expensive because there is, for example, some like crazy barrel aged beers. They're aged in some kind of super rare bourbon barrel or whatever that will drive up the price. Yeah, but like the like if you buy it not on a secondary market, if you buy it directly at the brewery, it will not be as crazy as like if you want to drink the best wines of the world and all this. So it's still, there is a bit of that wine thing in there, but it's not to the same degree, but there's the hype culture around beer I don't think it's as strong as it once was, but it's still there.
It's still there.
It's still there. I have bottles in my cellar of stuff from Belgium that I know is like really rare, and like I could probably sell this for good money, but I don't want to do that because I want to drink it.
You know what? I understand. And I understand the appeal of the hype as well. It's kind of the thrill of the chase, right? It's getting something exclusive, something rare, something that you would normally have to go on this pilgrimage to find, and that you can bring home and enjoy and have. And I totally get it. I completely understand.
But it also begs the question: are you in it for the hunt then, or are you in it for the beer? Because
does it matter?
You get a beer, I don't know. But the big thing is also like when you then like get this beer, that you've hunted, do you then naturally feel forced to rate it super high?
I'd say so.
Because you put in so much effort to get it, and you're kind of like, wow, this is amazing. You convince yourself it's amazing. Or do you get disappointed? And that like the only way to really confirm this stuff is with blind tastings. And blind tasting are so much fun to do. I've got some things planned for some friends. I've done a couple already where they're sitting drinking super hype barrel aged stout and stuff. And they're like, oh, this is really good. That one over there is better. It's just like, well, you wouldn't say that if you knew what you were drinking.
The intangibles are a big part of we have like whenever we do the ratings, we have like the overall where we kind of like try to factor in the intangibles because they're there, and it's silly not to acknowledge them in our opinion, because some beers are hyped to your point. Like it's silly not to talk about it. So they're definitely there. But it's interesting. The blind tasting, it's something that like removes that in a way. It allows you to focus. It's just like it's a hard thing to do. You gotta be very really disciplined, hard. I think, in order to do it.
Have you done like blind tasting with each other? Oh no, you can't because you can't ship.
We're in different places. We haven't done it yet.
Yeah, we're in different places. Yeah. It's I used to do it for a while. When I first moved here to the U.S., I worked at a big wine store. It also had a lot of beer. Like you might have heard of this called Total Wine. And I would teach the classes there, and one of the wine classes. And one of the things that I used to do is that I would always give people samples as we were going through the class, but I would always have them taste the wines first without telling them what it was. And because like a lot of times people would say, oh, I only like Cabernets. It's like, well, whatever it is. Like, I was like, okay, fine. And then like, okay, well, taste this. What would, and then I would describe it. This wine is delicious. It's actually a Pinot Noir or something completely different, right? Like, oh wow, I didn't know I like Pinots. Like, yeah, because you're biased, right? Like when you walk in, you know already you're gonna put like some some judgment on it before you get into it.
It's really fun to do it, both challenging friends but also challenging yourself.
Yeah,
It is.
Yeah,
but when you challenge yourself and you know the beers, it's it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah,
but
it
it's
does.
still really hard. Like it's still really hard. The most fun thing is when you challenge friends and you're like trying to pinpoint and pick out what it is. And we've done that a lot. We almost do that whenever we meet these days because we just have so much fun with it. And then there's been this thing of trying one-upping each other. Like that was one of my most loving moments of doing this was a blind tasting of Corona versus Sol. I think it was Corona and Sol.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
The Mexican lagers. And with craft beer people being, what they are, you're often very against macro stuff and whatnot.
Yeah, of course.
And I challenged one of my friends, Michael, who's on the channel, and he was like, I think he tried the Sol first. He was like, not super keen. And then he tried the Corona. He was like, "Wow, this is a really good lager." He was just like, he was loving it. He was talking about how this had the best bitter, like it was more bitter and it was a bit more crisp and refreshing. Like he would drink that all the time. He was like 90 out of 100 or something. And I was just like, I couldn't hold it in almost. And he was just looking at me. He's like, "What's going on?" I was just like, I was about to explode. And there was just like, maybe it's not Corona. Maybe it was a Corona versus a supermarket knockoff.
Okay.
It was Corona was involved.
Yeah.
And he just loved Corona. And it was so funny. And he got teased so bad for so long. Whenever we met people in beer who had seen the video and went like, "Oh, you shouldn't be here, man. We can go and get you some Coronas instead." And it was so much fun. I was like, but he doesn't buy Corona to drink it after that tasting, but he should because clearly he likes it.
But would he like it with the knowing what it is and that aspect added to it, right? That's psychological. Yeah. So funny. Recently, I tried. A friend of mine was traveling through Belgium, and he brought back a West Latirin 12 for me because that was one beer that we love. The Abbot 12 by Saint Bernardus. So of course, the association with the West Latirin, and you can get that in Belgium. I don't even think from what I know, we
can get it in Denmark now as well.
Can you as well? That's amazing. Okay. Yeah. From what I'd heard, for the longest time, you couldn't get it outside of Belgium.
But you had to travel to the Trappist monastery.
You had to, exactly, or buy it in the cafe outside the monastery, right?
Yeah.
So he went to the monastery and the cafe there, and he brought back some bottles, and he brought one over to my house, and we did a tasting. We had it next to the Abbot 12, and we're comparing them. But drinking that beer, I thought the exact same thing that we're talking about right now, where it's like, I'm really enjoying this, but am I enjoying it to the level because of the hype around this beer, because of how famous this beer is, and because of how revered this beer is? Am I finding things to appreciate in it as much as I am because of the intangibles, as we say? Or if I was just blind taste testing and somebody gave me this beer, would I be as excited about it? And I was trying to, that was one beer where that came up for me recently, where that was really on my mind, because I was really enjoying, and I was looking for things to really pull out of it. Or I love this, I love that. And would I have tried that hard to pull things out of it if I didn't know what it was? I don't know. But it was really good.
Yeah, that's the question. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that beer because I actually got some to revisit on the channel.
Cool.
Nice. I have in the cellar. I haven't done the video yet because it's also a beer that I remember loving a lot.
Yeah.
And I've done blind tasting with it and like the Abbot 12 and also Rochefort 10 and stuff where it did not win for me. That's also one thing, like with beer, it's always the new experience. But when you've been in it for a while, you also like, it's really fun to go back and revisit stuff. I was like, is it still as good as... Sometimes you get really disappointed. You're like, I remember this being like a banger, and then you drink it, it's like, this is not what I remember because maybe it was early in your journey or whatever.
Exactly.
Or sometimes you go back to something and it's like, I forgot how amazing this is.
Yeah.
Like, for example, a beer like that was for me. Actually, I've not drunk Hefeweizens in ages. Like, it was one of the styles that I liked a lot when I was early into craft beers. Maybe still not something I seek out right now, but there's a brewery in Germany called Andechser, and I had their Hefeweizen. Again, I've had it in the past, but I had it again, and I was like, wow, this is amazing Hefeweizen. This is just a banger. And I forgot how awesome the style can be because I've just been away from it so long.
Yeah.
So I think it's also really important as a beer geek once in a while to go back, try some beers you tried before. Not always be like constantly ticking new things or stuff like that, because you find out there's a lot of beers that are around like a core range beer for a reason because they are deserving of being beers that you can always find.
Yeah.
That's something that makes a lot of these core range beers. I think it's like the quality, and you try them and you're like, wow, okay, I understand why they're brewing this all the time, or why they're known for this beer. And why.
Yeah.
And I guess West Veteran is a case in point for that as well. The 12.
Yeah. I think we're gonna have to wrap for today. But man, this was so much fun.
We could keep on talking for a long time. It seems.
Oh, we
could.
can. We will have to. We'll have to have you back.
We've been going
if you
for an
want.
hour and a half, and it feels like we haven't even scratched the surface of like talking about YouTube, and like there's so many things we haven't talked about. And that's the beauty of talking to beer people. Every time we do this, it's like, oh man, we could talk for 6 hours right now. If you keep the beers flowing, we'll just keep talking and talking. Yeah. But if you're interested, we'd love to have you back on. I'm sure I can think of a ton more questions I'd like to ask you, and I'm sure Alessandro could too. And
yeah.
So
100%.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back. For anybody who hasn't checked it out, Master of Hoppets will, as usual, put a link to his channel down in the bio below. Yeah, man. I'm sure if anybody who watches beer YouTube, I'm sure has seen your videos before. And we always get really interesting comments when we do these things. Like people are like, "Oh my god, it's so cool to see you talking to them," because I've been watching both your videos for 5-6 years, whatever it is. So people always really enjoy these little crossovers because there's even though beer YouTube's kind of a niche thing, people still have their channels that they watch, and they don't necessarily always watch everything that's out there. So it's cool to see them.
I like to watch these kind of videos myself as well. Yeah. I think they're really fun. I like the banter and the back and forth and all that.
Me too.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Cool, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. This was awesome. Yeah, and we'll definitely do it again soon.
For sure. I'm down.